Pre-Millennium Signs, video number 11B, further tribulations that happen during the wheat harvest years. The purpose of these tribulations is not to be something fearful for those who are prepared. The purpose are to be either markers for those who are prepared of where we are in the wheat harvest, or they are to be things which change the world in such a way that people can no longer ignore God, sit on the fence. They have to choose a side during these times. Also, they're going to move the world closer to a millennial condition. Even these things that are difficult that happen during the wheat harvest will have a positive purpose to them. First of all, this is going to be during a 3.5-year period. I believe this is going to start in October of 2027 and run till April of 2031. However, if I'm wrong on the times and dates for this, this is going to be a 3.5 period that will happen, and you'll recognize it through these signs that are happening then. First of all, before we talk about these signs, let's talk about types and symbols in the last day. It's really important as you go through some of these books of prophecy, like the book of Daniel, the book of Revelations, Ezekiel, and Isaiah, you will see a lot of symbolism used. And unless we understand how symbols and types are used by the prophets of the Lord, we're going to miss a lot of the meanings that they give to us. First of all, what are these? Prophets like Isaiah, Daniel, and John use symbols and types in their prophecies to teach meanings. Why do they do this? Types and symbols, like parables, allow for multiple layers of meaning. They also hide truth from those who are not ready for it. Let's go over a couple examples of these. For instance, most of us who have read the scriptures are familiar with the symbol of the dragon. So most of us think of the symbol of the dragon in the book of Revelations as Satan, and that's an appropriate explanation of that symbol. But also in other places, the symbol of a dragon is used for Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So there's multiple meanings that could be attached to a symbol, and that's part of why symbols are really powerful. The other idea is that some of these symbols act as types, so they happen multiple times in history. They don't have just one meaning. So something that happened in the past, for instance, the exodus of Israel from Egypt, could be a type for something that's going to happen in the future. And when you see that prophecy mentioned or parts of it, you'll know that the prophet is trying to use it as a type to tell you about something that will happen in the future. Of course, Elder Bednar told us how powerfully the Book of Mormon acts as a type for our future, for our present day and our future. So what are some other examples of types? For instance, the idea of a beast. So we know a beast is a symbol for a kingdom, an empire, or a nation. And we know that because in books like Daniel 7, verse 17, the Lord actually translates this for Daniel so he would understand that. So here it says, 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings, and I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given unto it. Well, that sounds pretty confusing, and it probably was confusing to Daniel as well. And the Lord actually later in the chapter translates that. And so in verse 17, he says, these great beasts, which are 4 kings, which shall arise out of the earth. And if you go click on kings, it says in the footnotes there, kingdoms. So kings and kingdoms are often looked at synonymously, but the beast is a symbol for kingdom. So there's various beasts throughout the scriptures, and they're symbols for kingdoms. Horns are often symbols for kings or powerful people. So in Revelation 17:12, it says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So these men are rulers, powerful men, rich men, influential men. They didn't have a kingdom yet, but yet they gave their power to the beast, and they received power as a king. So the symbol of horns as kings or powerful people. This type of horn is synonymous with the horn that makes noise, like the shofar. So it's not necessarily just like a horn on an animal, but also it could be a horn that makes music or sound. Okay, the king of Assyria. So this is Isaiah And he uses the king of Assyria as a symbol for a ruler of a powerful militaristic coalition empire in the last days. Babylon is a symbol for the world, materialistic culture, and ideologies that don't lead to Christ. The Isles is used as a symbol for the American continent. Egypt, and this one is a really powerful one during this particular video because we're going to talk a lot about symbols and types in Egypt that represent America. So why does Egypt represent America under the leadership of secret combinations? Well, here's a few of the parallels. They're both superpowers of their time in opposition to another major superpower. They both used military intervention in other nations. They're both very wealthy and materialistic. The covenant people, as a separate people, lived within both of these nations. The children of Israel lived within Egypt for over 400 years. And the Latter-day Saints have lived within America for almost 200 years as a separate people. They're also supportive of Israel, but they also let Israel down. So let me give you an example of this in Ezekiel 29, verse 6. And all the inhabitants of Egypt shall know that I am the Lord, because they, meaning these inhabitants of Egypt, have been a staff of reed to the house of Israel. If you had a staff that you're leaning on and it was only a reed, how well would it support you? Not so well. And in fact, later on, they talk about how this reed actually breaks and pierces their hand. Both Egypt and America have supported the nation of Israel, but also let it down. Also, this is a declining power. Egypt, in their time, when Isaiah was speaking, was declining in power. They were a superpower, but they were becoming weak and perverse. Also, America today, many people can see that is becoming weak and perverse. And finally, Ephraim is from Joseph, an Israelite, and Asenath, an Egyptian. And so Ephraim, of course, is the main stock for the Latter-day Saints. And so you have an Egyptian mother and an Israelite father, which is very symbolic of Ephraim here in America, where you have Israelite ancestry, but being grown up within a Gentile nation. So these are just a few of these parallels between Egypt and America. And of course, there are many people who've noticed this parallel. I'm not coming up with these ideas myself. Avraham Gileadi does a great part where he talks about the parallels between Egypt and America. And so go check out his work. He has a lot on that. But let's now, with this idea of types and symbols in the last day, let's look at a few of these in these next signs or tribulations that will happen. This next one is false Christs and false prophets. What is this? Well, there have been many false prophets, but those in the last years will deceive many, possibly even the elect. This will be during a time of hatred and persecution of those who do not believe these false prophets and messiahs. Why? Well, Satan counterfeits everything, and he will seek to counterfeit the power of prophets and of the Messiah to deceive and destroy the faith of those who do believe. Where is this going to happen? Well, it's not specified, but likely in many places worldwide. Who will this affect? Again, not specified, except that many will be deceived, even perhaps some of the elect. When will this happen? Not specified, likely throughout all the last years. And this probably ties into the false prophet that's connected with the fifth beast in the book of Revelations. And we'll get to that sign in the next video. So let's read a couple of these scriptures about the false Christs and prophets. So this is Joseph Smith Matthew, covenant. And so why do I think this is something that hasn't fully been fulfilled? Well, these great signs and wonders and deceiving the very elect possibly is not something that we have seen in great numbers yet. And so I think that's going to increase during these last 3.5 years of the wheat harvest. Let's go now to Joseph Smith Matthew 1:5-9. Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and hate one another. And many false prophets shall arise, and shall deceive many. Remember, many people think of this as just during the great apostasy, but he is talking here of the last days, and so right before his second coming. He's talking about a few things, that there will be many who will declare themselves messiahs and shall deceive many. This is going to be during a time of great persecutions and afflictions for those who are believers. Many shall be offended and apostatize, and there will be many false prophets as well. I think the fullness of these is still yet to come, and I believe this will happen during the wheat harvest. All right, so let's go on to the next sign, which is that remnants shall marshal themselves. So this comes from the idea that there's this remnant of Israel, and that those surviving the destructions of the wheat harvest will be savage. Some of them will be savage and angry and will go through the remaining Gentiles like a lion through sheep. To marshal is to organize for battle. Now, I don't believe this will be all of Jacob's descendants, but I believe this is particularly those of Lamanite descent, because Christ quotes this twice in 3rd Nephi in chapters 20 and 21. And I have another video where I go through some interpretations of those lions and young lions. Why will this happen? Well, the remnants of Jacob, especially the remnants of the Lamanites, have long been oppressed by the Gentiles. Using an eye for an eye justice, this oppression will then be visited upon the Gentiles in turn. Where is this going to happen? America and perhaps elsewhere. Who is it going to be? The remnants of the Lamanites and others with the blood of Jacob. And when we know from Doctrine and Covenants, it's going to be after when the slaves rise up and their masters are marshaled for war. So let's read the actual scriptures for this. D&C 87:5. And it shall come to pass that the remnants who are left of the land will marshal themselves and shall become exceedingly angry and shall vex the Gentiles with a sore vexation. So if you click on the footnote for this, it shows that this is the remnants of the house of Jacob. Let's read a little bit more about this so we can understand it better. D&C 109 gives us some more here. And cause that the remnants of Jacob, who have been cursed and smitten because of their transgression, be converted from their wild and savage condition to the fullness of the everlasting gospel. So I think that many of them are still going to be in this wild and savage condition during the wheat harvest. And when many of these wars, civil disturbances, earthquakes, and destructions happen, they in their wild and savage condition are going to do better than many of the Gentiles. And I think they're going to take out their aggressions during that time on the Gentiles like a lion amidst the flocks of sheep. Now, what's going to happen? The Lord is going to be also converting them from this wild and savage condition. Let's keep reading. Verse 66, that they may lay down their weapons of bloodshed and cease their rebellions, and may all the scattered remnants of Israel, who have been driven to the ends of the earth, come to a knowledge of the truth, believe in the Messiah, and be redeemed from oppression and rejoice before thee. This is where I believe that it's going to be a process. In the beginning, those remnants of Jacob, the Lamanites, are going to be in this wild and savage condition, and they're probably going to be taking out their vengeance on the Gentiles who are at that time not united, and they won't have the advantages that they've had to oppress them. And those missionaries from the New Jerusalem are going to be going out among them and gathering them out, converting them. And they're just like the Lamanites, going to be laying down their weapons of bloodshed and coming to gather with Israel. So the last one here is in Micah chapter 5, verses 8 and 9. And this says, and the remnant of Jacob shall be among the Gentiles in the midst of many people, as a lion among the beasts of the forest, and as a young lion among the flocks of sheep, who, if he go through, both treadeth down and teareth in pieces, and none can deliver. Thine hand shall be lifted up upon thine adversaries, and all thine enemies shall be cut off. Here, I've talked about in another video the idea that the lion among the beasts is a symbol for the saints as they go forth among the beast nations of the world, as they gather into the Zion cities and build the New Jerusalem. And then the young lions are symbolic of the 144,000 going out among these flocks and gathering in the final converts. Those are other two meanings of this remnant going forth. Really interesting here is this idea of thine hand being lifted up. I think this is a title for someone. Thine hand, the hand of the Lord, is going to be someone who during this wheat harvest is going to be lifted up upon the adversaries, and the enemies shall be cut off. Don't know who that person is, but that's my guess. So let's go on now to the next sign, and this is where those types and symbols really come in. Here we're going to read in Isaiah chapter 19. What is this? This is the Nile or the Mississippi River drying up. And why is this going to happen? The drying up of the Nile is a symbol for the cutting off of wealth and food for the great nation that depended upon it. And it comes before famine. And why is this the Mississippi and the Nile? Well, in Isaiah 19, you'll see that it's speaking to Egypt. And so Isaiah is speaking to Pharaoh and to Egypt and the Egyptian people. But as Egypt is a symbol for, in the future, America under the secret combinations, most likely, just as the Nile is the main river of Egypt, the Mississippi and its drainage basin are the main river of America. Probably a third of America is drained by the Mississippi River and its tributaries. It's just as important to America as the Nile was to Egypt. Where is this going to happen? I believe this is the Mississippi River tributaries in America. And this could happen in Egypt as well in the future. Those who depend upon the rain and the river are going to be very heavily affected by this. During the wheat harvest, when the Assyrian rules. Let's read the scriptures here that explain this. Isaiah 19, 5 through 7. It's talking in Isaiah 19 and verse 4, it says the Egyptians. So this here is speaking about Egypt. Verse 5, and the waters shall fail from the sea, and the river shall be wasted and dried up. And they shall turn the rivers far away, and the brooks of defense shall be emptied and dried up. The reeds and flags shall wither. The paper reeds by the brooks, by the mouth of the brooks, and everything sown by the brooks shall wither, be driven away, and be no more. So you can see there's this drying up of the river and its tributaries. And this is, of course, using the Nile as a symbol for the Mississippi in the future. So why do I think this comes before famine? Ezekiel 29, verses 9 through 10. And the land of Egypt shall be desolate and waste, and they shall know that I am the Lord. Because he hath said, the river is mine, and I have made it. Meaning Pharaoh, king of Egypt, or the ruler over America at that time, who might be one of Ezra's eagle heads, or the Assyrian, is saying basically this is mine, and the Lord's saying nope. So verse 10, behold, therefore I am against thee, Pharaoh, and against thy rivers, and I will make the land of Egypt utterly waste and desolate, from the tower of Syene even to the border of Ethiopia. And once again, if you want a little more understanding about this, here the Lord in verse 3 says this, he's talking to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he calls him here the great dragon that lieth in the midst of his rivers. So that's where I think this is coming as famine, and it's coming because of the wickedness of the leaders at that time. Here, this is going to be during when the Assyrian rules, Isaiah 20, verses 4. Shall the king of Assyria lead away the Egyptians prisoners? Another related sign to this is number 15. The Egyptians, or we're talking about the Americans in the last days, are taken captive and scattered among all nations. Let's go first to Ezekiel 29, verse 12 to read about this. And I will make the land of Egypt desolate in the midst of the countries that are desolate, and her cities among the cities that are laid waste shall be desolate 40 years. And I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations and will disperse them through the countries. This scattering of the Egyptians is symbolic of a scattering of Americans among the nations. Let's read here now in Isaiah 19, 2 through 4. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight every one against his brother and every one against his neighbor, city against city, kingdom against kingdom. What is this? The Egyptian American people become weak. They're taken prisoners or scattered across the world. Why? Though Egypt or America hosted Israel and the Latter-day Saints, yet they will turn against the Latter-day Saints just as Egypt turned against Israel before the Exodus. And they will not learn from them. Also, they will mix their culture with God's people, causing many to be lost. We see that right now, as many among the Latter-day Saints are mixing into the world's culture. Where is this? America in the last days? Who? Those in America who do not gather to Zion's cities or the New Jerusalem. This is really important that you understand. This is not going to happen to those who are faithful and to follow the prophets. They will be gathering into Zion's cities and to the New Jerusalem during the same time. When? This is during the wheat harvest, when America is led by wicked and weak leaders, and the Assyrian is in his 42 months of undefeated power. Jeremiah 46:19. O thou daughter dwelling in Egypt, furnish thyself to go into captivity. For Noph, which is basically it's a Hebrew name for Memphis, the capital of Egypt, shall be waste and desolate without an inhabitant. So This is going to be something that is terrible for those who do not flee to Zion and to the New Jerusalem. Here, Ezekiel 30, verse 26, and I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations and disperse them among the countries, and they shall know that I am the Lord. So again, here is the positive amidst all of this negative. Those Americans who are scattered among the nations, who are taken prisoners, will know through this experience that the Lord is real. And many of them may come back during the grape harvest. Missionaries from the 144,000 may go out and rescue them and bring them back to Zion. Maybe some of them who are not ready to gather with the saints during the wheat harvest, maybe in captivity, they will have a change of heart, just as the Israelites during captivity many times had a change of heart and turned unto the Lord again. One thing more I'd like to mention about this, kind of going back to this timeline. If you look at when this happens, this is Americans scattered and taken captive. I believe it'll be around this period. If you look on my timelines, you'll see these bars that go for a distance of years. And the bar simply means I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but I believe this is more or less the order of it. So I believe that Americans scattered and taken captive will probably be the last 2/3 of the wheat harvest. If you're looking at these and you look up here, you can see these are the blessings that happen during the same time. You'll notice that when this taking captive is and scattered is happening, corresponds to when the New Jerusalem is being founded and the people are being gathered out to it. And you have this call to flee to Zion. So there is a positive to each of these negative sides. It's just a question of what we decide. Will we choose to follow the prophets? Will we choose to stay with the ship of the church? Or will we melt in with the world and be carried by them captive for a time? So that's kind of up to us what we will do. All right, let's go to the 16th sign we're going to talk about. This is wars among all nations. Now, we've had wars since the beginning of time, and we have certainly had our share of wars in the 20th century. Why is this particularly relevant to the wheat harvest? Well, wars have increased along with the wickedness of men. Prior to the final burning of the great and abominable church, war is going to be poured out among all nations, and this is going to include civil wars. Why? Wickedness, pride, and deceit among the people, and especially among their leaders, will be at such a high that war is the natural outcome of that. Where is this? It'll be worldwide. All people will be affected except those who have faith and priesthood authority, and even among them, not all will be spared. When will this happen? Well, we know that since the American Civil War, wars have been poured out, but it's going to intensify during the wheat harvest until the great and abominable church is burned or destroyed. And so it is literally going to be all nations. You think about the First and Second World Wars, as we call them, and many nations were involved in that, but not all nations. And so we're going to have a time where war is poured out on all nations. This is still to come in its fullness. Let's read a few of these scriptures about this. Joseph Smith translation of Matthew 1:29. Behold, I speak for mine elect's sake. And if you're listening, that's you. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. Now D&C 63:33. I have sworn in my wrath and decreed wars upon the face of the earth, and the wicked shall slay the wicked, and fear shall come upon every man. So really important to know that when you take the righteous out, when you gather them out, the wicked slay the wicked. Now in 1 Nephi 22:13 through 14. And the blood of that great and abominable church, which is the whore of all the earth, shall turn upon their own heads. For they shall war among themselves, and the sword of their own hand shall fall upon their own heads, and they shall be drunken with their own blood. And every nation which shall war against thee, O house of Israel, shall be turned one against another. And they shall fall into the pit which they digged, to ensnare the people of the Lord. And all that fight against Zion shall be destroyed. And that great whore who hath perverted the right ways of the Lord, yea, that great and abominable church, shall tumble to the dust, and great shall be the fall thereof. And we're going to talk about that sign a little later in this, or actually in the next video. Let's talk about how these tie into the idea of civil wars, not just world wars as we think of them. Isaiah 19, I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians. So it's going to be, unfortunately, Americans against Americans. Here in D&C 45:68, And it shall come to pass among the wicked that every man that will not take up his sword against his neighbor must needs flee unto Zion for safety. Zion is going to be existing during this time of wars among all nations, and those who do not wish to be involved in these wars will flee to Zion. So those are the tribulations that are going to be happening during the wheat harvest. Next, we're going to cover these pivotal last tribulations that happen right before the transition from the wheat harvest to the grape harvest. And one of the things that I want to bring up with all of these tribulations and signs, it's just like our prophet has said, now is the time for us to prepare for the second coming of Christ so that we can prepare the world. We're going to have that opportunity during the barley harvest, which is the period we're in right now. And as we prepare ourselves during this time of relative peace before the wheat harvest, when things get really hairy, we are going to be able to spiritually and temporally prepare ourselves so that we can help others, because there's going to be a lot of need for help during that time. And if we are in need of constant help, it's going to be very limited what we can do to help others. So now is the time. My invitation to each of you is go into these scriptures on your own. Read these. If you find other scriptures that talk about these signs or other signs during this time period you think that relate that I haven't covered, because I don't know that I have found them all, please share those with me, because I think we right now are being touched by God's Spirit, inspired to share what we know, to ask questions, and to prepare ourselves more so that we can be that help to others during the wheat harvest, and so that the Lord can use us to help build his Zion kingdom. It's my testimony that Jesus Christ knows the end from the beginning. He knows the times and the dates. He knows all of the signs that are going to happen, and he will guide you and help you be prepared by reading through these scriptures and giving you inspiration that's personal to you. Some of these signs may affect some of you more than others, and he will help you know what you need to do to be ready. We don't have to be afraid about these signs that are coming. We can instead prepare ourselves with the few loaves and fishes that we are allotted during this barley harvest, and we can trust that as we spiritually prepare ourselves, God will multiply those loaves and fishes till we are able to give unto those around us and help them. And that is my prayer, is that Jesus Christ can become our strength, the arm that we rely upon. And that only happens as we go into the scriptures for ourselves and gain a personal testimony of these things, gain personal revelation, as our prophet, President Nelson, has invited us to do. Do the work that's necessary. Go into these scriptures, read them, interpret them for yourselves. Don't just rely on what I'm saying, and find that personal inspiration. That will make you closer to Jesus Christ and help prepare you. I leave you my testimony that Jesus Christ's grace is enough to prepare all of us. And I say this in Jesus' name, amen.